There is a text written before the flood that describes something that should have been impossible after the flood. It describes it with a precision that seems not mythical, but forensic attributes, powers, origin, nature. And the most disturbing thing is not what it describes, but that each subsequent civilization found it exactly where the text said. Greece found it. Mesopotamia found it. The Hebrew tradition had always known it and preferred not to name it. Medieval Europe pursued him for centuries without knowing his true name, without understanding where he really came from. The text that described it was burned by order of the church councils in the 4th century after Christ. But what he described was not burned, because what he described was already in the world. It had already taken deep roots. Today that text is opened. Today the witnesses are called, and in the end, the names will be pronounced for the first time. But for names to carry weight, one must first build the case from the beginning, even before the water. We must understand what the Watchers were, what they did, and what they left in the world that no flood could erase. What they left was not just a race of giants, but something subtler, more persistent, and harder to eradicate. To understand what survived, one must first understand what was destroyed, and why it was destroyed with such urgency. The Book of Enoch is not a minor religious text. It was sacred writing for Jesus, for the apostles, and for the early communities. Peter, Judas, and Paul directly cite them, and their images fill the apocalypse throughout, unexplained by anyone. It was removed from the canon at the Council of Laodicea in the year 363 and confirmed as apocryphal in Carthage in 397. The official reason was doubts about authorship. The real reason was it exposed too much about the true origin of evil. They did not completely destroy it, because the Ethiopian church never considered it apocryphal and copied it for 1600 years. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone into a cave near the Dead Sea and heard ancient pottery break. Inside, they found fragments of the Book of Giants, carbon-14 dated to before Christ, in the library of the Essenes. It was not late Christian heresy, but pre-Christian writing that the Qumran community studied alongside Isaiah and Deuteronomy. What that text describes about the women who joined the Watchers is what the councils did not want you to know. And it is also the key that explains something that no comparative mythology manual has managed to explain satisfactorily. Why does the same supernatural female figure appear in all cultures around the world with the exact same attributes? To answer that question, we must return to the world that existed before the water, the world that the flood tried to erase. Imagine a pre-flood land where the boundaries between the spiritual and material planes were permeable, almost non-existent. From the heights, 200 beings whom the Book of Enoch calls the Watchers observed the nascent civilization of Adam. The answer to that question has been buried for 2,000 years under declarations of apocryphal nature and library bonfires. But the texts survived. The Dead Sea Scrolls are physical, datable, indisputable as material evidence. And what they say about the mothers of the Nephilim is what no council could completely burn, because it was too widespread. They were guardians of the cosmic order, custodians of knowledge that the universe had reserved for planes higher than the human. But they saw the daughters of men and felt something that no being of their nature should have felt, a desire to descend. Chapter 6 of Enoch recounts it with a chilling coldness that they swore a pact on Mount Hermon and descended together. They took wives from among the daughters of men. The Hebrew text uses a word that implies a deliberate and calculated act. It was not reckless passion, It was a metaphysical conspiracy to insert their lineage into the genetic chain of humanity. In exchange for access to the mortal plane, they taught them what no human should yet know: metallurgy, astrology, enchantments. They were taught to read the movements of the stars, to prepare poisons and medicines of supernatural power, and to invoke entities. The daughters of men were not passive victims. They were initiated into a knowledge that transformed them irreversibly. From that union came the Nephilim, giants that were neither angels nor humans, but something beyond any known category. They devoured the resources of humanity, practiced cannibalism, and sowed terror in a land that cried out to be freed. God heard that cry. The archangels received the order. The flood was the response to the greatest transgression in cosmic history. But before talking about the flood, we must pause to consider the mothers, what happened to them, and what they carried inside. Because the flood destroyed the bodies of the Nephilim. Their spirits, however, did not ascend or descend properly. They were left suspended, according to Enoch, like hungry entities between planes, doomed to wander in search of embodiment forever. And the mothers, the initiated women, the wives of the watchers, the sacred text keeps an eloquent silence about them. A silence that the Book of Jubilees breaks into fragments, that the Zohar whispers in parables, that history shouts in images. Something they carried survived the flood. Something occurred beyond it that allowed them to keep going. Let's call the first witness. The first witness is Greek civilization, the most documented of ancient Western history. The Greeks were rationalists avant la lettre. Geometry, philosophy, astronomy, medicine. They were not prone to irrational terror. However, at the heart of their mythology lies a figure before whom even their most powerful gods would retreat cautiously. A female figure of mysterious origin, connected to the primordial powers preceding Olympus, before Zeus himself. The Greeks described it with attributes that, viewed from the Book of Enoch, are extraordinarily specific and coherent. He had a power over matter that defied all natural logic. He could alter the physical state of living beings just by looking at them. The Book of Jubilees goes further than Enoch in a detail that theologians have systematically ignored for centuries. It says that the Watchers did not appear physically at first. They seduced women in dreams and visions. For weeks, perhaps months, they altered her perception of reality before there was any physical contact. Initiated women not only received knowledge, but were reprogrammed on a level that no purification ritual could reach. Her head was crowned with serpents, the universal symbol of forbidden knowledge in all ancient Semitic traditions. When he died, his body did not bleed human blood, but rather creatures, one of which was a giant of supernatural power. The Greeks acknowledged that things hadn't always been this way. There was a transformation, a crossing of an unacceptable line. She was changed after touching something sacred inappropriately, gaining access to a power that was not hers to wield. Does that sound familiar? It should, as the Book of Enoch describes this exact process for the initiated daughters of men. The Greeks did not invent this figure. They inherited it from a tradition older than Greece, older than Egypt, older than Sumer. They inherited it from the collective memory of a world that existed before the flood, and transmitted its terrors in the form of myth. But the first witness has not finished, because the Greeks also knew other figures of the same type, of the same dark origin. Female creatures with a supernatural voice that lured men to their destruction with a beauty that reason could not resist. Ulysses had to tie himself to the ship's mast to resist jumping into the sea when he heard them. while his crew used wax in their ears. What kind of power is that? It is not ordinary seduction. It is the power of something that operates on a level that precedes will. The Book of Jubilees describes exactly that mechanism, where the Watchers first seduced women in dreams and visions. Before taking physical form, before carnal contact, they had already altered the perception and will of their chosen ones. The initiated daughters carried in their voice, in their presence, in their gaze, something that was no longer completely human. The first witness rests. What he described exists in the oldest Greek texts, but the second witness goes even further back. The second witness comes from 3,000 years before Greece. The second witness speaks in cuneiform from clay tablets. The Sumerian and Babylonian civilization left records of a supernatural female figure that makes Greek testimony pale in comparison. Not for their drama, but for their antiquity, these tablets are contemporary with the earliest biblical texts, if not earlier. The figure they describe is a nocturnal, feminine entity with power over life and death, especially over newborns. Cuneiform texts explicitly associate her with the Anunnaki, the beings who descended from the sky, those who came from above. In Akkadian, its name includes roots, meaning wind, night, and also signifies origin from another plane of existence. Babylonian priests created rituals like amulets and invocations to shield themselves from her influence. Why did the advanced Babylon civilization invest effort in protecting itself from what should be just superstition? Because the priests of Babylon knew texts that described their true origin, texts that circulated alongside the accounts of Enoch. The scholar Hermann Gunkel documented in 1895 the exact correspondences between the Mesopotamian texts and the Hebrew Genesis. But there is a detail in the Greek testimony that modern scholars have systematically and revealingly ignored. The oldest texts, predating Hesiod, describe these figures not as monsters, but as beings of transition. Beings that had been something before what they were, who retained memory of a previous state closer to the human. That memory of a transformation, of a before and after, is exactly what the Book of Enoch describes for mothers. They are not cultural coincidences. They are parallel memories of the same event, seen from both shores of the antediluvian world. The Babylonian figure has traits in common with the Greek figure that can't be explained by simple cultural contact. Both are feminine. Both have powers that transcend physics. Both are connected to beings that descended from the sky. Both evoke in those who encounter them a blend of irresistible attraction and absolute terror that nothing purely human produces. The second witness has spoken, and what he said matches the first in every important detail. Let's call the third. The third witness is the most uncomfortable of all, because he belongs to the same tradition that produced the Book of Enoch. The Hebrew tradition has known this figure since before the flood. The rabbis commented on it with visible discomfort for centuries. They could not deny it because it was in texts that were too ancient and too revered to be simply dismissed. They couldn't explain it within official theology, since its origin hinted at something the canon had suppressed. The Talmud mentions her. The Zohar dedicates entire pages to her. Kabbalistic tradition turned her into one of its central themes. These sources claim she existed before Eve, refused to submit, and escaped to the primordial chaos. She joined the fallen, birthed creatures that shouldn't exist, and became the mother of an unrecognized lineage. The Zohar explicitly connects it with the Nephilim through the concept of mixed souls, entities that are neither human nor angelic. And here is the detail that the rabbis could never resolve. their deep connection with the lineage of the mothers of the flood. Because the figure described by Hebrew tradition shares the same fundamental attributes with the Greek and Babylonian figures. Night power, connection with the fallen, border nature between worlds, ability to engender what has no category. The most respected rabbis acknowledged that Enoch clarified aspects of this figure that Genesis does not explain. Enoch was removed from the canon precisely because he explained too well where this figure came from and what her existence meant. The third witness has testified, and their statement is the most revealing as it comes from within the very tradition that accused. But the Babylonian testimony contains an additional element that the Greek does not have, and which is extraordinarily specific. The priests of Babylon described the method by which this figure transmitted its nature to subsequent generations. It wasn't typical biological inheritance. It activated under specific conditions and could stay dormant for generations. The Book of Jubilees describes exactly that mechanism of latent transmission. The Babylonians had documented it first. There is one final witness, the latest, who left only ashes and speaks from the silence of medieval bonfires. The fourth witness does not speak in Greek, cuneiform, or Hebrew. The fourth witness speaks in the language of fire. From the 15th to 17th centuries, Europe executed 40 to 60,000 people accused of witchcraft. Most of them were women, and what they were accused of possessing was not a learned skill, but something they carried within. The Malleus Maleficarum, a 1487 witch-hunting manual, details what inquisitors sought in a disturbing manner. They sought women with supernatural knowledge of plants and stars, women who spoke with entities invisible to others, women who possessed a power over life and death that no human education could explain or confer to anyone. The inquisitors weren't sure what to seek, but they knew it upon discovery, labeling it a pact with the devil. Without the Book of Enoch, the antediluvian context, or the Nephilim mother's story, that was all they could express. But the Book of Enoch, which Ethiopian monks copied by candlelight while Europe burned its guardians, makes it clear. The daughters initiated by the Watchers received a knowledge that is transmitted, that persists, that does not die with the water. The Book of Jubilees is explicit that this knowledge was preserved and passed to the other side of the flood through the sons of Noah. Ancient rabbinical traditions suggest something from a tainted lineage entered the ark without Noah's full awareness. This explains the immediate reappearance of giants in Canaan after the flood, entire tribes of beings of supernatural stature. This explains the Mosaic laws against witchcraft, so absolute, so devoid of nuances, as if they were fighting something specific. This clarifies that the order to exterminate certain Canaan tribes was about containing a lineage, not ethnic cleansing. And this explains why, in medieval Europe, 1,000 years later, inquisitors were still finding women with that ancient knowledge. They hadn't learned it. They carried it, a thread passed down through generations from before the flood to medieval bonfires. The fourth witness has testified from silence. The 4 testimonies are on the table. It is time for the indictment. And there is one final element of the Hebrew testimony that connects everything in a way that no other explanation can match. The Zohar, in its section on the origins of evil, explicitly describes how the knowledge of the Watchers was transmitted. It speaks of women who carried in their nature something that the angels had permanently deposited in the human lineage. It describes a flame that water can't extinguish, time can't diminish, and that re-emerges when the conditions are right. 4 witnesses, 4 civilizations, 4 millennia of separate history. and the same figure at the center of it all. Feminine, originating from a transgression of boundaries between worlds, bearer of a knowledge that should not be human, with power over matter, over life, over the will of those who encounter it, connected to beings that descended from the sky. Greece saw it and built temples for protection. Babylon developed protection rituals that lasted for 1,000 uninterrupted years. The Hebrew tradition included it in its most secret texts and discussed it in its academies with a discomfort that never disappeared. Medieval Europe sought to eradicate it for 3 centuries, executing tens of thousands of women in the process. Why such urgency? Why so much fear? Why this systematic and global effort to suppress something that should be just a myth? Because it was not a myth. The Book of Enoch, which the councils burned and the Ethiopian monks preserved, makes it absolutely clear. The mothers of the Nephilim were transformed. The knowledge they received did not disappear with their bodies in the flood. It survived in its descendants, diluted but powerful, passed from mother to daughter through generations that history did not record. And those descendants were found by every civilization that had eyes wide enough open to recognize them when they appeared. Each civilization called them by a different name, because none had the original text that named them correctly. None except for the tradition that preserved the Book of Enoch. None except for those who also read the Book of the Giants. It is time to pronounce those names. It is time to connect the 4 testimonies with the text that explains them all. Because the names that Greece used, that Babylon used, that the Hebrew tradition knew, that Europe feared, all point to the same origin. The figure that the Greeks described with snakes on her head, who turned anyone who looked directly at her into stone. The priestess transformed after crossing the border between the sacred and the forbidden, between the human and the divine. The creature before which the Greek gods themselves recoiled because they knew where it came from and what it carried in its nature. That figure has a name that Greek mythology gave it without understanding that it was the name of an inheritance, not of an invention. Her name is Medusa. The Book of Enoch describes exactly that process of a woman initiated, transformed, no longer completely human. The creatures that the Greeks knew with an irresistible voice, which dragged men to death from the water. Those that operated on the will before reason could intervene, exactly as the Watchers operated on the mothers. But the 4th witness has an element that the other 3 do not have. It has dates, it has names, it has court records. The files of the Spanish and Italian Inquisition document with bureaucratic precision what was found in each case. Knowledge of herbs that contemporary doctors could not identify, rituals with no traceable origin in any living tradition. As if that knowledge had not been learned in this life, but remembered from some deeper and older place. Those figures have names that mythology referred to in different ways, but the text of Enoch groups them into a single category. They are called sirens. Their power over will is the exact echo of the power with which the Watchers seduced the mothers. The figure that Hebrew tradition knew of even before the flood, which the rabbis commented on with discomfort for centuries. The Zohar links to the Nephilim, birthing creatures with the fallen, a mystery the official canon could never clarify. That figure has a Hebrew name that appears in texts as ancient as Genesis itself, although Genesis chose not to include it. Her name is Lilith. The Zohar clearly states she embodies mixed souls, a lineage that crossed the forbidden boundary, and the women that medieval Europe pursued for centuries, whom the inquisitors could not name but recognized upon finding them. the bearers of knowledge about stars and plants that cannot be conferred through human education, who spoke with invisible entities. The heirs of the curriculum that the Watchers taught on Mount Hermon in exchange for access to the human lineage. They were called witches, and what the Inquisitors pursued was the last echo of the knowledge that the Watchers had sown. Medusa, sirens, Lilith, witches, 4 names that 4 civilizations gave to the same heritage without having the original text. The text was there from the beginning. It was burned precisely because it explained everything with too much precision and clarity. The Book of Enoch described them before Greece existed, before the height of Babylon, before the medieval bonfires. He called them the unavoidable legacy of the Watcher's transgression, a feminine legacy that water could never cleanse. And now that you have the text and the names, the world you thought you knew has a crack through which a different light enters. Because if this lineage is real, if these figures are documented heritage and not invention, the battle they describe is not over. The same Watchers who descended to Mount Hermon operate today with different tools, but with the same old manual. The promise of knowledge that transcends human limits, of power beyond what is permitted. The text has not changed. Only the names on the cover have changed, and those who know the original recognize the trap, even if it comes wrapped in technology. If this truth ignited something you didn't know was turned off, subscribe to keep unearthing what they prefer you don't find. 4 witnesses, 4 independent descriptions, and a single text that anticipates them all with a precision that allows for no chance. The Book of Enoch described the origin. The Book of Jubilees described the mechanism of transmission. The Zohar described persistence. And the files of 4 civilizations documented, unknowingly, the outcome of that origin, that mechanism, that persistence. Now we just need to say the names that the original text always knew, and that the world could never fully forget.